Google Didi बोल्नु
Hey, Sumangle. Okay. Sorry, I don't know if I pause my audio if the audio gets paused on the watch party. So that's why I'm not pausing it.
Hi, Sweta. How are you, Thomas?
Hey, I don't know why Thomas isn't able to speak. Let me see. Weird. Thomas, can you speak?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Do you want to check the cameras too?
It won't. It says I can't start my video because the host has disabled it.
Disabled.
It says
Okay.
the same to me.
I think it will enable it once we start the video. I don't know how to do it. That's why I need to figure this out. There's something new for us. Allow. Okay. I've figured it out. It's now I've allowed you to. Okay. Cool. Sorry. I'm kind of playing the watch party, so I'm scared that if I pause it, it will get paused in the watch party.
Oh yeah, no problem. Can you mute the video so we don't hear it?
Con esta biodiversidad obtenemos bienes y servicios que son esenciales para nuestra subsistencia. Oxígeno, alimentos, materia prima para el desarrollo económico, medicamentos, energía y hermosos paisajes son apenas algunos de los que valen la pena mencionar.
Sin embargo, nuestro desarrollo, hábitos de consumo y estilo de vida modernos están causando la pérdida de biodiversidad y comprometiendo su integridad. Estos factores directos e indirectos están originados en valores y comportamientos sociales.
Un reporte de la WWF presentado en el 2014 menciona que las amenazas para la biodiversidad son la explotación y la degradación en conjunto con el cambio de uso de suelo, el cambio climático.
Nice background, Sima.
Thank you so much.
Is that Isimangaliso?
Nope, it's further in the south. Let me see.
Ooh, nice. Amazing rock, though.
If you feel like kind of there.
Cool.
What did you need my picture for, Gracia?
A surprise coming up later in the afternoon.
I know Thomas knows what surprise that is. What's happening, guys?
I don't really know. I have an idea.
Oh my God.
Wow. Oh, wow. So, Gracia, Sweta, in my closing, in my wrapping up part, you want me to just summarize key things that came out of the discussion?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And then Priska will say like, hey, thanks so much for joining. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna open the program.
Who's going to show the presentation? Can Thomas, you show your the presentation since you're doing the questions?
He's not here.
Thomas is here.
No, yeah, but he's not exactly sitting here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
I can do that. And I don't know if you have the presentation from the co-chairs, because I think they want us to, Christian just share it.
He sent it.
Yeah.
I can do that if you want.
Sure. So you will show the slides. Okay. So the slides.
Yeah, also ours, I think.
Why is this silent? Yeah. Oh, I switched up the music.
When we talk about pollination, we have to think about more than just the honeybee. There are wasps, hoverflies, moths, and even mammals and birds.
Can somebody
for
just tell me if
pollination.
I mute it on the watch party? Does it mute for everybody, the watch party, so that I can mute it and then we can continue here?
I think if you close the window.
If I close the window, then it ends.
This way we can continue.
Okay.
Yeah, try to see what happens on your side.
Okay, I'm just going to mute it now.
Morning coffee and fruits and vegetables.
Okay, did it mute for you, Thomas? Okay.
No, I can still hear it.
Okay, perfect.
The International Day for Biodiversity gives us a chance to celebrate the incredible variety of
Chantal
life
is here. Hi, Chantal.
appreciate.
Hello.
Hi, Chantal.
Hello. Hey, Gracia, Sweta, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Amazing.
So cool to have you. You've been so busy. Woohoo.
They're still doing things simultaneously. There's a watch party going on there, and we're also preparing for the webinar at the same time.
Oh yeah, the watch is not over. Right?
Yeah, no. So there were like some more last minute additions from chapters, so we had to like put them in. So now it's like 5 minutes overtime. So we're trying to hope that we can still go live while the watch party continues.
Wow.
So I think Christian needs to still get on, and we are just testing out everything and preparing stuff for to start broadcasting in the next 5 minutes.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah. So I have the video from Elizabeth and both presentations ready.
Okay.
Do we want to make sure we can get the video to work and we can hear it?
Yeah.
Sure. Let me try with you now. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see it?
I can see you. Oh, wait. I can see there's a given team.
We can't see the video, Gracia, in short.
You have to, Shweta, you have to give me the ability to share screen.
Okay, let me do that.
We have our guest speaker in the house.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Hola, Christian.
Hello.
There's also some Béziers.
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Yeah.
Bonjour. Hey, bonjour.
I think that Francis was having some personal issues, but he's going to be able to join. So we're kind of.
Oh, that's awesome.
Perfect. Thank you so much for making it possible.
Christian, do you want to make the changes then in the presentation?
Yeah, I'm just gonna start with the given. All right. Sweta, you need to give me the sharing rights. I think I'm just like as a participant.
I'm just trying to figure that out. Okay, all panelists. Okay, I did it.
Okay. Cool.
So Christian,
now
I am gonna share Elizabeth's videos now. Hold on.
Okay, cool. Then
Just to
I'm
make
gonna stop sharing.
Is it working? Okay.
The incredible variety of life on Earth.
I can hear it.
Works great.
Okay, good. And so I have the co-chair's presentation and I have the Givens presentation. So do you, Christian, want to make the additions or I do it?
I think if it's okay, I think it's better if one person does it. So for the co-chair's presentation, yeah, you have the final one. So Elizabeth, like Basile's assistant, just told us that they would like us to move the slides. So then you would have to share your screen.
I read that, yeah.
Okay.
So the issue here is like, we did the, hold on. Ah, okay, cool, here.
Yeah, it's already in. I just got a message from Chantal saying that Francis is gonna join.
Huh?
Yeah, so I will not share this slide from Given, right? Because she's not coming then.
No. Jyoti is also gonna come, but I'm now confused. Like I just received like a text a minute ago.
Hello?
Yeah, Christian.
Oh,
Yeah,
there's Francis. Okay.
I'm there.
Oh, Francis is here.
Wow. Thank you, Francis, for joining us. How is your daughter? Is she feeling better?
She's resting. She's resting. They have given us some medication, but she's resting.
Oh, okay. I hope it's nothing serious.
Not really that serious, but it keeps coming back. So
right.
She just keeps feeling dizzy most of the time.
Okay, like if you feel like you want to go back to take care of her, just like, you know, like
No. We are back home. We are back home.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think we also have Jyoti in the call. No, this is Francis. Okay, because your account is showing as Jyoti.
Yes, Jyoti will join, and she was asking, you know, if she can participate towards the closing session to make closing remarks, possibly.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
I thought I was seeing her name in the list.
Hi guys, I'm here. This is Jyoti.
Yeah.
Hey,
wonderful.
Jyoti.
Thank you, Jyoti, for joining. Okay, so then
I don't know how to turn on my camera, but I will. Ah, here we go.
Oh, perfect.
Wonderful. Super.
Yes.
Thank you. Good to have you in the house too. Okay, then we're complete. All right. Gracia, you let us know when we should start.
Okay, I think that will be Shweta. I will just put this like as a main screen, and then Shweta just take us live, and I have everyone's presentation ready. So yeah.
Okay, so the presentations are on. You can make this full screen, right? So that the, yeah.
Like this.
Awesome. And the video, you have it open so that you just minimize this and you'll play the video, right?
I have it here in YouTube, and I will just go like this, click.
Okay.
And play. Yeah, I will close all this.
Okay. Yes. So so thank you everyone for being here. I think we're really excited to do this. We're doing the first live. So we're going to now jump right ahead and start streaming. And this is going to be streaming live on the Given page as well as the UN Decade page. So, okay, if everybody's ready and you've checked yourself on the cameras, we'll go live now.
Sweta, before we go live, I think we have to admit the participants, because right now we only have the panelists in, and since you're the host, I think you have to admit them.
No, I haven't got any requests from attendees yet. It's 0. So I think
0.
Yeah, so I think they can directly just click the link and join in. And I think maybe also people are thinking that they'll just see it live on Facebook.
Yeah.
So that could also be a reason that they haven't joined in.
We've been promoting it, like go live on, like go and watch it on Facebook, so.
All right, maybe somebody could send a reminder in the WhatsApp so that people can also join through the link.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay.
So once I go live, I could do that, but I don't think I need to admit them because they all get their own separate links, but I'll keep an eye out for it. Okay.
All right. Super.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So everybody ready to go live?
Ready.
Yes.
Okay. I am just clicking on the stuff now. Okay, it's loading. It's just preparing to go live. I think I'll just do a thumbs up for Gracia so that she knows she can start.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still loading.
It's fine. Whenever it's open, I will just like wait a bit and then say welcome. We're gonna wait a little bit more.
Okay.
I am using 2 devices, so I'll be able to check questions in the Facebook site as well.
Thank you.
Sveta, we just got a message. Apparently people cannot enter, like there is a message being displayed that the webinar will begin soon.
Okay.
It should be open for everybody. Maybe
Yes.
as the host, can you check if there is anything we need to activate?
Okay. I'm just checking that.
The watch party is just over, so it's okay.
Yeah, broadcast. Okay, so now we are broadcasting live to all the attendants. So hopefully now they should be able to join. It's the live is preparing still. So I think it takes a little more of the bandwidth to actually do the live. Yeah, it's still loading. Okay. Now the watch party, so hopefully this should start. Okay, we have 21 people who have joined in. So
Okay.
yeah, I think we are great. Gracia, you can take it off and I will let you know as soon as we are live so that the people who are participating also get a chance to hear what's happening.
Okay. So whenever we're live, just let me know.
Done.
A little bit more so everyone is here in the conversation. Thank you for everyone here in the Zoom and also for those that are watching us through the Facebook Live.
Yep. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get the live going. It's taking much more time than I expected. Just give us a few minutes.
It's because of the cross posting, Shweta. Yeah, this is why it's taking. Yeah, it's a bit slow, but it's fine.
Okay.
Sima, can you see us live on Facebook? Because I don't.
Gracia, are you asking me to check if we are live?
On Facebook, yeah, because I don't see it in my phone. So
yeah, in mine it's still saying preparing. So
okay. So thanks everyone who has joined the Zoom call. We are about to start in a couple of minutes. We are just finishing the setup of the Facebook Live and we will start. Thank you.
Do you guys think it makes more sense to start, and then when we go live, we just introduce again, because we are recording this call too. So we do have the full recording of the call as well, which we can post.
Yeah, then we can upload it to YouTube if it doesn't work with the live.
Yeah, I think we can start at 10 past if it's still not on. That's fine with me. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. I just don't want to trust Zoom too much. They have kind of let us down in the past. So.
Guys, a plan B is that I can go live in our Instagram, just from my phone here. That could also be a possibility. So yeah, let me set it up.
Okay. Christian, do you think you can try to go live if I make you a host?
No, it won't work for me. I tried it before.
Okay. Then this worked.
Given that we have to finish at 11:30, maybe we should really start in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you everyone who has joined here through the Instagram live. We are going to be streaming as well in this channel. And if you are like, if you cannot see the whole thing here, please go to our Facebook page. So we are going to start in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Okay, so shall we go then, team?
Yes.
Yep, we go.
Okay, so welcome everyone here, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, together with the CBD. We are glad to have you this morning. We're gonna have an amazing conversation with the co-chairs. And thank you also for providing us with your questions that we're gonna be sharing later. So now the floor is yours, Christian. We can't hear you.
You are muted, Christian.
I think today we're doing everything wrong that every beginner does wrong. So happy Biodiversity Day, everybody. Welcome to our Q&A session today on the Global Biodiversity Framework. Before we start, I just wanted to introduce a little bit our network. So next slide, Grecia. Next slide. Next. Yeah, so we're the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We are the youth constituency under the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're bringing together more than 350 member organizations in 145 countries. And we also have 40 national chapters all over the world. Next slide, please. Here you can see a little overview of the chapters that we have created. Next slide. And yeah, before we go to the video message, many of you know that 2020 was supposed to be the super year for biodiversity. We were expecting that this would all culminate in October with the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework in Kunming, but due to COVID-19, we had to postpone all of this. And it's a little bit unclear when exactly we're going to carry on with our negotiations for the Global Biodiversity Framework. But as a matter of fact, we need to make sure that biodiversity is not being forgotten as a priority. Currently, everybody in the world is focusing on COVID-19, and that is right. So we need to solve this crisis. We need to solve it together. But we also need to realize that we cannot go back to normal after the crisis. And one of the quotes that I saw online was quite interesting. It was saying, imagine if the media reported on the climate crisis like it does on the coronavirus. Headline news every day, constantly releasing an updated death toll, analyzing whether world leaders are doing enough, most importantly, making public believe this is something to take seriously. And I think this sums up quite well the situation we're currently in and how much media attention COVID-19 is getting. And in many ways, this is maybe what we could aspire to get was biodiversity, that it's really becoming something that is a top priority globally, because if COVID-19 is throwing something, it is then that we cannot continue without protecting the basis of all our survival. And that is biodiversity. This is what we're celebrating today. And we thought we put this little webinar together for all of you so that we keep up the momentum, that even though 2020 is not going to be turning out the way we all were hoping it would be, we hope that we can make not just 2020, but the coming decade, a decade of action and a super decade for biodiversity action on the ground. And how this can be done is something that we're going to discuss today. But let's start off with a little video message from our acting executive secretary, from Elizabeth. Gracia, I think you have to activate your computer audio so that we can hear the sound. There is like a little button when you share the video, and you have to like check this box so that we can hear your audio. We currently cannot hear it.
You are muted, Gracia.
Variety of life on Earth, to appreciate nature's contribution to our everyday lives, and to reflect on how it connects us all. The ongoing pandemic serves as a stark reminder that we need to work together to preserve nature and protect human health for all of us. And in particular, you, the generation of tomorrow. This year's Biodiversity Day theme, Our Solutions Are in Nature, highlights that biodiversity remains the answer to sustainable development, where the needs of the present generation can be met without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. While the world is striving to end the pandemic, we all need to take urgent action to build a resilient and sustainable economy that incorporates nature at its heart. When I say we, I include you, young people. You are even more likely to be affected by the crisis because you youth constitute 1.8 billion of the world's population. But you are also essential contributors to solutions of today's environmental challenges. In the couple of years, you have made your voices heard on the streets, at the high-level meetings, and all over the social media. You have strongly demonstrated your wishes to participate in finding solutions and to take positive actions for our planet. Millions of jobs in sectors such as the forest, fisheries, agriculture, tourism, and pharmaceuticals are all dependent on nature. A large proportion of the population, including you, the youth, depend on the jobs from these sectors. About 1 billion people living in extreme poverty are in the rural areas where employment opportunities are already scarce. Their household incomes are based on ecosystems and natural goods that make up between 50% and 90% of the so-called GDP of the poor. And since 90% of the world's youth live in developing countries, youth are among the population that suffer the most from the impacts of biodiversity loss. In order to face these challenges, we need the world to continue to work towards an ambitious and informative, effective post-2020 global biodiversity framework to be agreed at the 15th Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. And we need you, the young people, to continue to engage in this process. Through the Global Youth Biodiversity Network and the many non-governmental organizations, the young people like you have worked with other youth and stakeholders, but also with government officials to prepare important inputs that are already incorporated in the framework. As a result of this collaboration, the Convention on Biological Diversity community increasingly continue to recognize that youth are important allies and enablers for implementation. Seeing your energy today, I trust that youth are willing to engage, interested in finding solutions, and enthusiastic at the idea of taking action beyond institutional and geographical boundaries. I trust that you will be ready to implement the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as soon as it is adopted, if not before. Let us continue to work together to ensure that this framework can contribute to increasing the benefits for people and for generations to come. Let us make the most of the momentum for biodiversity that we have so far built, and remind all stakeholders that biodiversity has to remain a priority on our political agenda. Let us show that intergenerational cooperation can lead to finding innovative and efficient solutions in nature. Happy International Day for Biological Diversity.
Wonderful. Well, it's a pity that Elizabeth cannot be here by herself. This was a wonderful, very, very strong message. And I think it reminds us all what this is about. I'm also glad that she highlighted the importance of intergenerational cooperation, because this is something we cannot solve if we just work in an isolated way, generation or sector by sector. This is something that we all have to do together. Next slide, please. We're extremely privileged today because we have two very special people with us, Francis and Basile. Francis and Basile are the co-chairs of the working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And until March, I almost saw them more frequently than my own parents, because they've been traveling all around the world to facilitate different discussions and to make sure that different governments with very different interests are coming together to find a solution how we can address biodiversity better in the next decade. And they're here with us today, and they will share a little presentation on what post-2020 is about and why it is so relevant for us, and especially how we as young people can contribute to this, because it is a framework for all. Next slide. We're also privileged that we have Jyoti Mathur-Philippe with us today. Jyoti is the director of the Implementation Support Division in the CBD Secretariat, and she will make some little remarks at the end, focusing more on what role young people can play in implementation. But with this, I would like to give over to our co-chairs, to Francis and Basile. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we're really excited for what you have to share with us.
Good morning and good day to all of you. Francis and I will take turns in presenting, and here the deck is coming up. I'll turn immediately to Francis, who's going to be presenting the first part. Good morning and good day to all of you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll just start with.
We are live on YouTube, so YouTube has let us start the live. So you could just introduce yourself just once again so that people live on YouTube can see it. Thank you so much.
Good day to everybody. My name is Basile Van Haaf. and I'm here today with my co-chair Francis. We have a short presentation to introduce the subject. We're mostly interested in the question and answer. So Francis, why don't you start, and then I'll pick it over after slide 9. So over to you, Francis.
Yeah, thank you very much, Co-Chair. And again, good morning, everyone. It is good evening almost now on my side here. It's actually good evening. It is coming to 6 almost, anytime from now. It's like that, 35 or about 35 to 6. So I had a lot of encouraging remarks about the co-chairs. We've traveled, yes, and I think I could also say that I've never traveled like I did this time round when I, given this task of being a co-chair. And again, to say that I think COVID has really changed the landscape in ways that global landscape in ways that we didn't expect. Meetings like this, we couldn't have thought would happen some time back, but is now the new normal, as they say. So is 2020 now looked at as having lost to being the super year for biodiversity? I think my co-chair and I would think that it is still true, that this is still actually the year for biodiversity. And most of you will be seeing that now nature can actually be put back to recovery. If you just see around you what is happening, due to the lockdown that has taken place globally, and you see the recovery that is taking place, it clearly shows that actually we can put nature back to recovery. So I think even then we're already learning the lessons before we can come up with certain text at all in the framework itself. So having said that, let's go to the next slide. So this is basically it. And most of you have heard about this, that we are really losing a lot now globally. There is a lot of loss of species, but it is believed this is the 6th mass global extinction. And that has implications as well. It has on health, it has on food and water security, it has on the economy. You've just heard the executive secretary talking about sustainable development. How else are we going to achieve that without biodiversity? And also you have had her reference to disasters and pandemics. This is going to be the reality if we become, or the global community does not really protect nature. Disasters and pandemics will be much more harsh when they happen, and certainly we shall be seeing more of that. And biodiversity has a very big role it plays in this. So going back to nature, respecting nature, using nature more sustainably, humanity's future is more guaranteed here. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Some technical, okay. So here is just to tell us a little bit about the species loss that we are talking about, some scientific information that is available now. And when people say we've lost 1 million species, they are at risk of being, going extinct, maybe in the next 30 years or so. Now, some people may think that is just species getting lost. Human beings are going to be here, but it's very unlikely that we shall be here as well with all this loss of species around us. Over 90% of marine fish stocks declining. You know that what that will mean in terms of livelihoods, in terms of even sustainable development itself. There are some countries, of course, that the fish industry is so important. And even the revenue of the government would decline. Lost since 1970. And look at that, 80% of insect biomass lost in the last 2 decades. When you think about insects getting lost, is it just insects? People shouldn't look at this just as a small issue, because these are pollinators. This is just about our food systems. Our food security is gradually getting compromised with this kind of losses around us. Then 46% of the forest failed by human activities. Actually, I could even tell you that what COVID has shown us is that the world can go back to those days that man was not there yet. If you look at it, if man disappeared from this planet, everything would be okay. Seems human beings are such a terrible creature on this planet. When it comes to nature, they don't want to use nature carefully, and therefore nature is really bearing all the pressure that it can to sustain humanity. So we need to be much more careful in the coming years about nature. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, so what do we hear from the economists? What do they tell us about loss of biodiversity? You know, there are risks to business. They will tell you, sometimes they'll tell you it is security, they will tell you it is peace, but it is now loss of biodiversity is among the top 5 risks to business. And this is where the business community may want to take a leaf from, as there is loss of biodiversity around business could as well shrink. Already I know, back in Uganda here, how the tourism industry is suffering because of COVID. You know, and so if take it that, for example, biodiversity is lost, then that means even the tourism industry would disappear. So there's a lot at stake from the business angle. Then inaction versus the cost of actually taking action. If we don't do anything now, then the cost keeps piling. It will mean that there's a lot that we need to spend. There's a lot of investment needed. But if we take action now, we reduce on that. Of course, then there is massive amount of resources available in subsidies. And you will be hearing us talking about this more, maybe when we next meet about the framework itself. How do we maybe do repurposing of some of these already locked up subsidies so that it benefits biodiversity? Let's go to the next slide. So that is, fortunately, the lack which is there. 196 countries who are parties to the CBD are working together to have the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I had Christian getting a little bit worried about the framework. I can tell you that the framework will be there. We are working very tirelessly since Rome. We've continued to work, and it will be there. Even if it is next year or any other time, it will be there. But we want it to be there as soon as possible. So this is, I think, the action that was there in Rome. So let's go to the next slide. So when you look at this then, the framework itself, as you will see from decision 1434, is that there are guiding principles: gender responsive, transformative, comprehensive, catalytic, visible, knowledge-based, transparent, efficient, results-oriented, iterative, and flexible. So those are the 13 principles that guide the development of this framework. So being open and transparent and inclusive and having the science base is one of those, of course, that we are very much pursuing. And as you will know, that this framework has got 2 co-chairs that were designated, that is Basil and I, and it has got the open-ended working group through which the negotiations are happening. So the framework is for all, really, and you'll keep hearing this, including you, the youth. I've said severally that personally I was a youth. Many years back, I didn't even know I would be here, where you see me today. But also now I can see that we are supposed to be handing over to the youth. So as you have heard the Executive Secretary saying, really, you, the youth, you are the future. And for us, we're even glad that some of you are already very active in this process. So when you will next take on this mantle, we believe that the framework itself and biodiversity has got disciples out there who are young, who are vibrant, and who can help to push the cause. So let's go to the next slide. I hope this is slide number, I can't see it very well here, co-chair.
7.
This is it?
7.
7, okay.
Good, you're good.
All right. So process, where are we? And I think this will talk to what Christian was saying. Are we losing it? Yeah, is super year for biodiversity getting lost? Christian, just have faith. We are on track. I know some messages circulating on WhatsApp here in Uganda when somebody is asked about his CD, which is missing in 2020. on it and is asked, so why is 2020 not? They said, you know, I didn't do anything other than wash my hands. So I couldn't really put anything there. Just washing my hands was not very serious stuff. So 2020 has, but for us, we did some work in February, part of March. So where are we with the process? The 3 stages: regional consultation, the thematic workshops that took place, and then the negotiations. Most of these, some of you may be aware, we had the first meeting, before the first meeting of the working group, the regional consultation, 5 of them were consulted and completed successfully between January and March this year. Then, so last year. Then we had the first meeting of the open working group that took place in August. And after that, we were asked as co-chairs to prepare something, some preliminary zero draft, and present at SBSTTA 23rd, and also the working group on Article 8J meetings. And we did that. That was in November last year. But also, following from that, we've had a number of thematic consultations that are taking place on restoration, on marine, resource mobilization, accountability, and capacity building. This one took place just at the margins of the second meeting of the working group in Rome in February this year. And then after that, we are now moving into developing draft 1.0. But before that, we might have actually other meetings planned. If possible, we are thinking that should happen. Of course, the dates keep changing because of COVID. We are going to have the 24th meeting of SBSTTA and then the 3rd meeting of SBI. But before that, we should have, I think now we are changing the strategy. We are going to have the synergies meeting, might just happen just before SBSTTA. And then the sustainable use is now going to happen more online. We might pursue the online approach to that. Now, what will happen at SBSTTA is that we really want SBSTTA to mainly focus on indicators, focus on baselines, and other scientific technical issues that we need SBSTTA to really give us further guidance on. The text, you might see some changes in the text of the goals of the targets. But we wouldn't want that negotiation of SBSTTA should fail. Then after that, we should then have, after hearing, getting some feedback, we should prepare the draft 1.0. And we think maybe we shall have about 6 weeks to do that, and then post it 6 weeks before the 3rd meeting of the open and working group. This, again, the date is now flexible. It's not yet confirmed now. And then after the 3rd meeting of the open and working group, we should then have COP 15, still in China, of course. So this is it. I would summarize for you where we are, where we have been, and where we are intending to go. The next slide, and then I can think the coach will come on. So I think some of this I've already explained in the previous slide, that we are going to present to SBSTTA a table which will have goals and targets. It will have some elements of components, the monitoring elements, the indicators, and then also the glossary part of that document that will be submitted, issues on baseline, and then the linkages to SDGs. We have heard a lot about this. So this could be up for peer review. Again, the date is there, 8th June up around 22nd June. And then we hope we can, after that, now work on another document, the one that will be, of course, be made available now for the meeting of SBSTTA. After first here getting some views on during the peer review. So then you will have again that document that will be posted. After that, you have the table of still going to be a revised table, which will have the glossary information as well, the baseline, the linkages to SDGs, and then we also think SBSTTA should tell us these aspects of numerical values on the targets. That's kept coming over and over again. And then we hope that in between, somewhere in August, if possible, we could have some further webinar on accountability on resource mobilization as well. So these are all things which are planned, but we hope we are going to be able to do that. And I think the other timelines are already spoken about them. So the very last, then my co-chair will come on the very last slide. Yes. So I think from what, to borrow what Christian was saying, having moved, Basil and I, really the movement I've never made in my life up to now, all the 5 regions. Most of the time, 3 weeks we are off from home, 2 weeks we're off from home. So around the world, we had the regional consultations. And we have also participated in those thematic consultations, informal meetings, conferences, then the formal, of course, open group meetings, 2 of them to date. But things have come out from there. And one of the, which I'm seeing, or we have seen clearly, is your role as youth, that you are a very, very important factor. You have a very important role to play in this process, both in terms of during the time we are negotiating the framework itself, but also when it comes to implementation. A framework of 30 years, I can tell you, requires young people. Most of us, we shall be tired and in our verandas, I suppose, not far from now. Then the executive side made reference to this, intergenerational equity, as being an essential component of the post-2020 global diversity framework. We have to coexist. People have to coexist. We have to play our different roles with the different ages, different age brackets that are there. Only one planet is for us. And then the link to climate change, as well as, of course, the link to SDGs. We've tried our best now as we speak. And I think when eventually you see the next draft of post-2020, you could see some changes. We are really working very hard to make sure we respond to what came out of it. So thank you so much. I think I'll hand over to my coach, Basil.
Thank you, Francis. If we can move to slide number 10. Okay, so you've seen that model probably a few times. That's the evolution of the high-level model. And I'll go over the next few slides and giving you some details on what we're thinking. So vision is there. What we're working on is how we're going to be defining the targets that are in the green box. And in order to ensure that that vision is reached, then we need to define how do we define that vision in terms of tangible aspect, and that's where the goals come in. We received some really good comments in Rome, and the idea now is to define a 2050 vision that is accompanied with some 2030 milestone. So if we can move to the next slide. Oh, before we go there, well, that's okay. I can speak to this one here. So you can go to 11. Sorry, I'm messing with so you still have the vision, the goals are the same. The threats you see there that we're going to be using still the 5 direct drivers of biodiversity loss as enunciated by the IPBES. But we heard very clearly that people wanted to see something around species. So that's something we're considering very carefully. On the needs, what we heard very clearly is that people wanted us to be broader in a sense and also clearer. So the notion of sustainable use of species will still be there. The notion of sustainable activities on the landscape will also still be there. Probably you will see kind of a broader definition of environmental goods and services or ecosystem services. First draft was focusing on water and health, but that's still going to be there. And health, if anything, is a stronger statement. Sharing of benefits definitively will continue to be there. Some evolution you will see on the tools and solution. Incentive and economic will remain a very strong element. Law, regulation, and policies will also be there, together with the 2 expression of mainstreaming. Biosafety will still be there. I think we're evolving in our thinking about behavior change, sustainable production, consumption, and delivery chain. and then you will see some new language there. And also lots of work being done on enabling conditions, means of implementation, and responsibility and transparencies. I think there is good, we're really looking forward to the contribution of SBI, but also looking forward to how parties want to discuss that. Do they want to see it at COP15, or do they want to have that discussed together with the rest at open-ended working group 3? So moving to the next slide. You see here the targets as expressed in the in draft 0. As indicated earlier, there was some work being done on them, but essentially you're talking about an evolution, not a revolution. We heard very clearly some message about the need to work closely, a simpler system of targets around 2050, and I think we get something to put on the table very soon that you will see is trying to answer to what we heard. You will see also some evolution in the language around the threats, and we're really looking forward to the substat discussion, both in terms of the indicators and also direction on what is possible in terms of baselines and also links to the SDGs. So all those pieces are working together, and I think a lot of the work we're doing with Jyoti and colleagues from the Secretariat, but also with the chair of SBSTTA and SBI, is to ensure we have a seamless process that works for parties and for you. So this is not just about following the rules and making sure every T's is crossed and I's is dotted. This is about having a meaningful conversation that enables to have the good negotiation. Youth and health and cultures and those aspects will continue to be there. So no change there. You will see the same kind of approach. So I don't think I need to say a lot more there. You will see an improved and increased place for resource mobilization. That's a message that came out loud and clear. So, and it's a very appropriate one. So expect to see that as well. Next slide. What's your voice? And what's your role into this? So what is a vision? The vision is 2050, and then Francis says that in 2050 we'll be retired. I definitively think our role in the conservation agenda will be different when I get to 2050, and your role will be different. So what's your role in terms of building the new world? There is lots of talk about building back better after the COVID, or building back new system, and you're the one that will be using those system and those economy. So basically, I think you're an essential part of that, and we have to work with you. So very, very pleased to be part of this event today. The framework is being developed for 2050. There will be check-in every 10 years. We're working on the system for transparency and responsibility, and there may be some global stock take within the 10-year period. So it is both a short-term process, but also a long-term one. Biodiversity is borderless. I don't know any culture, any groups, any nation that has link with biodiversity. It is a social cultural link. We're talking about equality and cross-generational equality is an important aspect of that. I was talking with the Nordic Youth Council a few weeks ago, and we talked about the notion of how generations work together. And one thing I noted to them is you, the youth, are being supporting the plant or the most of the effort during the confinement. It is not fun to be sitting in an apartment in a university town and not being able to go out, etc. And you're doing that for people like me and people older than me, because we're the one that are most at risk, not you. You're doing it for us. So, you know, there is that kind of general chain of things we do for each other, and how all of that is working together, and how this, I think the crisis is bringing to the world attention that we're all in this together, and the things, what goes one way goes the other way as well. nature use and health, connecting nature is essential to sustainable development. We're very happy to hear Elizabeth Maema talking about the numbers. In my country here, if you look at where the youth are, they're mainly in indigenous and local communities. You know, there is a massive amount of youth coming with that background, and they have a very good connection to health, so we have to work with them. The concept of One Health and how we relate nature health, human health, and ecosystem resilience, and there is many different definitions floating around now. Eco health, One Health, unified health, and we're gonna have to work together in terms of better understanding how all that is working together. Next slide. So what can you do? You should join, and you are joining in both at the global level, at your national and regional level. I think they are all important. Do not hesitate to contact Francis and I. Very happy to be active at the global level, but equally happy to join regional groups if we can be helpful, and I encourage you to join in the activity. Collaborate. I think as much as you can bring a unified voice with strong intervention at the international, national, and regional meeting, that's very important. So working together as you're doing today is something you can do. Connect with like-minded country. It is very important to understand that at this point in the process, Francis and I cannot entertain suggestions sent directly to us. They have to come through subsidized BIN parties. So that's a very important point to keep in mind. Organization, be prepared, listen to the document and review them. Identify the organization and be them private or public that want to support you and work with you. I think there is many opportunities. It's going to be a tougher proposal as we are moving forward, and we feel that there is going to be some difficulties. But I think you get a very strong message to send, and one that a number of organizations will listen to. Learn from others. I think I learn every day. I learn listening to you. I learn through that process. I don't think I will ever stop to learn. And I'm just like you. I think every day in our life, we got to look for the tidbits and see how we learn. The way we learn change over time. That's a detail. Write letter, sign petition, engage politically. Those are things you can do that I cannot do. So that's very important. And then participate, engage yourself. You have to be part of that action. When you get to 2050, you have to look back and say, I was part of that. So that's a very important part of it. Next slide, please. So how do we communicate? And clearly, you know, you had the Friday for Future, a very powerful movement where people were gathering and can get on the news. And that's something from the past a little bit. You're gonna have to find new ways to do that. And you can do that very effectively from electronic means. There is ways, it's about adapting and learning, and if you cannot do it, nobody will be able to do it. Your impact will be stronger than ever. You'll have to engage with friends and family, all generation. Volunteer work is highly emblematic. For example, in North America, there is that action of planting milkweed that provide habitat for a butterfly that migrate across the continent. And those are kind of very small things we can do, and you can do within, you know, during the period of confinement, is work on your local environment in terms of making that more highly attractive and more biodiversity friendly. Sustainable and choice are also very important, and a number of us, and I think this is not about giving a lesson to anybody and telling anybody what they can do or cannot do and what's their culture. In my countries, there are people with culture deeply ingrained in eating meat, and their system is actually adapted to that, and it's not my place to tell the people in the north that they should not be eating meat. But what I think is we should all make a responsible choice and be aware of those choices and provide that information. I think it is not about making rules and making things not available or forcing people to do things. It's about encouraging people to do it. It's the nudge factor and how we make people making different choices. It's very interesting to see that during the COVID period, there is a decrease in the consumption of animal protein and an increase in the consumption of flour and all those baking. So people naturally are moving to that. And we have to understand that and encourage that and make that stick for the after COVID period. So I am looking at the current crisis as a very serious and sad event, but also as a giant laboratory of a different way of life. And for some of us, there is some aspects that are very good. We don't need to crowd in urban transit to get to an office and crowd again at night. We can work from home. So look at that and look at all those choices you make every day and work with them. Next slide. Help us, help you, and how that's how all the pieces are brought back together. I'm sure you've noticed that we've put all those various pieces through the deck, and now they're coming back as a jigsaw puzzle. Empowering people, and I think that's a lot of what you're doing through GYBN, and I think you're giving a voice to those youth groups across the world, and the more you can increase the colors on that map that Christian shows us in the beginning, the better. What does investing in youth mean to you? So how much are you investing in yourself, in your group, and how much others are investing? So that's another important. Making the bridge into intergenerational and intercultural understanding, I think we got a lot to learn, and I think we got a lot to do in terms of creating those links and making sure that the voice are heard. And perhaps it is also you have a very strong voice, and you've been very actually very successful in getting your message across. What I think you need to keep in mind is how your message are influencing the positions of parties. So what is the content of the message? It is great to pushing people forward, but within that push, you need to have a lot of useful and important elements that they can readily accept. Convincing people and changing behaviors to a greener life. I think I don't need to say more than that. I think I've repeated that 3 or 4 times, but you have a unique place to do those kind of under the radar kind of social changes. Clearly, some of us, like Francis and I, have children's mind, are pretty older, but I'm at the point in my life when my children are telling me something is done, I look pretty sad, so I change. So that's something we listen to. So next slide, and I think I'm getting toward the end here. Here is the end of our presentation. I'm looking forward to the chat box. I've not looked at it in the last few minutes, but everything's gonna be all right, as they say in Italian here. And I think we gotta keep up that momentum of working together and working with people. So looking forward to the question, and back to you, I think, Christian.
Thank you so much, Francis and Basile. I'm so happy to see that you still preserved a lot of the energy that I saw on your faces when we were in Rome almost 3 months ago. So that's very good. Thank you for all the motivating words that you shared with us. I was very happy when I read the line, youth are an essential actor. So I think this is something that we definitely agree with. You also talked about intergenerational equity. So I'm really happy that this was all mentioned. We will now go over to the question and answer session. Before we go into the live part, we have received a lot of questions through the Google form that we sent around. Thank you so much to everybody that sent us questions. And we will start with these questions. And right after this, we will open up the floor. And then all of you who are here can ask your questions to the co-chairs. We already saw that a lot of people submitted comments and also some questions. So please be a bit patient. We get to them in a few moments. But let's start with the questions that we had received before. Thomas, I hand over to you now.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate what Christian said. So just thank you to everyone who sent in questions. We received a lot of questions. we tried to group similar questions together. So you might see that wording might have changed a little bit, but it was just so that we could kind of encompass the most amount of questions as possible. So we'll kind of move along to the first question there that we have prepared. So this one was from, and I apologize if I pronounce names wrong. This was from Bijay Bashal, and his question, and their question was, as the post-2020 global biodiversity framework is created, what differences are we facing in terms of drivers of biodiversity loss, pressures, and other factors compared to 2010 when the previous strategy was created? So I believe this question is more along the lines of, at the kind of global stage, what sort of differences are we seeing now compared to you know, the previous strategy? How has that landscape changed?
Thomas, before we jump into that question, I forgot we also have Jyoti from the CBD Secretariat here. Jyoti, if you would also like to respond to any of the questions, feel free to just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Francis, maybe I'll start to see a few words and then you can, as usual, correct me after that. My sense is that the drivers of biodiversity loss has not changed that much over the 10-year period. They have been kind of growing over time. What is changed is now we have the IPBES assessments that provide us with a lot more clarity on what they are and then give us a frame to shape our action. What has changed also is the reaction of parties to the convention. They have asked us very clearly to give us a clear depiction on how the action we propose they take will help solve those problems. So it's not about shooting in the dark and hoping it's going to get there. It is about, okay, I'm gonna do protection and conservation of this. I'm gonna do reduction in the use of this. How does that ensure that I'm gonna get to the goal? And that's how I think that's one of the big difference. Francis.
Thank you, Basil. You always make fun that I'll have to correct. I only compliment you. Exactly what you have said is correct. I think what else are we seeing perhaps different? As Basil has said, perhaps these drivers have remained more or less as they were. It is on the intensity of them becoming much more. Take for example, if it is expansion of area for agriculture, you will see more of that happening because of increasing human population globally. So definitely the pressures are just increasing in scope, I mean, or in magnitude as the years go by, because human population is not going down. So that is the major thing I would say there. But also, I think this period, we are seeing a lot of emphasis being put on taking into account climate change as contributing to biodiversity loss. Maybe that is something that at the time we are adopting the current framework or the current strategy, it might have not been as strong as now, but you can see now people really are thinking that. But then the other also is on the SDGs, that we see people really want us to bring out very clearly that as a new lens to seeing that biodiversity becomes more relevant to policymakers, to decision makers, because the loss of biodiversity, then achievement of the SDGs could be compromised. So those could be the other and others. I mean, some other new things that have come when we look now at the post-2020. But largely, the drivers have remained really the same. The drivers and the pressures, it's not increasing in magnitude.
May I just add one thing in this? I think one of the biggest changes that we face right now is that political pressure is changing also now. So the biodiversity loss and the pressures remain the same, but there is a high level of spotlight on biodiversity loss now. Parties have fully engaged in this process now and understand that we need to do something. And I think the youth can be a really good part of that movement by creating, linking with their national focal points and the biodiversity focal points, etc. So I think that would be also a key to this challenge.
Something I forgot to point out, another new dimension we are seeing is that even right now, there is now very much recognition of, and I've seen it happening a lot in Uganda here, people are beginning to link actually disasters to loss of ecosystems and others. So this is something maybe people are taking for granted, but if you are following the news in Uganda now, we are having landslides, we are having floods, and most of this is where people have degraded the environment, where they have settled in fragile ecosystems. So people are beginning to see the need to actually protect nature, to be better in terms of sustainability of livelihoods and even security of life itself. So these pandemics and disasters is opening the eyes of people that being reckless to nature is not going to be the way to go in the years to come.
Fantastic. Thank you all for your responses. I think it's very interesting to kind of point out that a lot of those, while a lot of those drivers are the same, the kind of other factors are changed, and especially that linkage between kind of climate change and that will to include youth increasing, as well as that kind of like global look at biodiversity. So thank you for those answers. The next question I have here was submitted by Julian Lokerlo from Denmark. And I believe in the chat there was a similar question that was submitted by Jessica. So the question is, why do you think that most of the Aichi targets weren't successfully met? And how can we ensure that the next set of targets are stronger, based on science, and achievable while still remaining robust? So kind of what sort of lessons learned are there, and how are we ensuring that this next step in global biodiversity protection is going to be stronger than those previous targets?
Well, maybe I could start. First, it's important to keep in mind that if the actual letter of the targets may not have been reached, there has been a lot of good work being done over the last 10 years. So it's not like nothing happened or it was a total disaster. What we learn and what countries have told us is they want to have realistic, achievable targets. They want to have measurable targets that are smart. And also, they've asked us also to look into making sure that there is a much more robust transparency and responsibility system. And what does that mean? That means one where the plans that are provided, the evolution of the NB subsystem is one where countries are able to see, and there is a transparency element, how each others are making the progress. So perhaps some plans which are much more comprehensive in terms of addressing all the relevant targets, and that are available according to a schedule that parties will agree to. So the second element is around the reporting elements, and again, it is essential that we get to a system where we globally get the elements in time, and that turns us into the third element, which is around review. And elements of the review system is going to be performed by the Secretariat, which is what an organization like IPBES, which is around the global stocktake and how we're going to be assembling the objective part of those reports into a tracking system that enables us to know whether we're making progress toward those targets. But there is also kind of the learning elements and the more subjective part of the review mechanism. And we're going to be testing some interesting ways of doing things, and where parties will be presenting to peers how they're doing. And then finally, there is the classic peer review system within countries. So basically, I think the elements of having achievable, they're not aspirational, they're real targets that according to the parties we can achieve, and then having strong mechanism and able to see where we are. this is about learning about what has not worked in the previous cycle, but also what has worked. And we know that having simple targets like 17 and 10 was something that captured the imagination and the attention of politicians and made for really good accountability. Francis.
Thank you, Basil. Just to add a few points here. What could have also contributed to the IT targets not being successfully met were some were really process issues. For example, the review and updating of the NBSAPs, because the parties had to do that after the strategic plan was adopted so that they can begin to implement the targets, the global targets. But that process alone took 5 years. Other parties, even by the time we are beginning to work in COP is adopting a decision to begin post-2020, other parties were still on this process. So really, that was a big stumbling block. And I think this time around, we need to be looking at how, if the NBSAPs are going to be aligned, that it doesn't take all that time. And then it consumes a lot of time. Because if you take 5 years, 6 years just to review and update, what time do you have to implement? The other was on resources for implementation. Again, that is something that didn't come as anticipated or as expected. A lot of discussions were happening on targets, the doubling of the double, and so many things happened around that. And then the other is on capacity building. Really, at the time when the framework is adopted, then you find there was discussion on the capacity needed to implement that strategy. And that kept going on as well. It kept going on in COPs after COP. And this time around, there is already effort now to make sure we have the strategy, capacity building strategy in place in advance, in concurrently with this, so that we are not adopting and then saying now develop the strategy for capacity building. So this is why most of the things, even resource mobilization, they're happening concurrently to try to bridge the other gap of, as I said, is in reporting, the cost of reporting, especially for the LDCs. Look here, the LDCs are given $20,000 for a long time to report how much can you do possible with that. That means people have to rely on data that was already there. But again, with a framework like that, there should be a system in place for really countries to systematically keep collecting data. So by the time you think of going to institutions to get data, even that data might be very old data. So this time around, things have to be done a little bit different if we are going to see a better reporting in the post-2020. I think those are just a few to add on what my...
May I just add one very essential part of this new framework is that it's a very participatory and open process this time. And we have had IPLC, civil society, business, everybody being part of this. And hopefully this will ensure that the targets will be much stronger and achievable in the future. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you for all those answers. I think that's very kind of nice to know that the looking at those previous targets, there were some successes that we can build off of, but also kind of lessons learned in terms of making sure that the next set of goals and targets are realistic and measurable. And there is a bit more of that transparency around kind of reporting. And then also kind of indicating, and I might jump ahead a few questions here, so I apologize, Grecia, but kind of indicating around those some of those process issues in terms of, it takes 5 years for an NBSAP to get created, or it takes time for these to be implemented at the national level, and kind of, mentioning that kind of capacity building strategy and kind of increasing reporting. So I was kind of hoping to jump ahead a few questions because there was one that kind of feeds into this. And it was from Vijay Bashyal from Nepal. And it was, how can we ensure our countries deliver on the strong COP decisions that they signed onto? And how can we ensure that NBSAPs are created promptly and accurately reflect COP decisions. So I know that this was, Francis, you touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if there were any kind of like concrete kind of plans and strategies. Is it around that capacity building strategy? But I was wondering if there were kind of a bit expanding on those discussions around how we can make sure that MBSAPs are prompt and that we're able to deliver on those strong COP decisions at the national level.
So I won't repeat what I said about the system and accountability, but I think one element of answer to that question is the way to know who's doing what and how progress are made. But I think Thomas, you point to an important point, which is around capacity and resources. And definitely, we heard very clearly that we can have the best plan in the world, perfect plans, everybody work together. If we don't put resources on the table and we don't make resources available for people to implement them, that's just a paper or a document that rests on the web somewhere. So lots of discussion about resource mobilization, and clearly that's going to be a very important aspect. The ground is shifting under us as we work. We had a workshop in Berlin with very, very good work, and it was very encouraging. But since then, the COVID crisis and this kind of unprecedented draw on public finance is changing the game. I think it is not to say that we're negative about it. I think it's changing the way we're making decisions and the speed at which we need to make those decisions. So if we're not fast in providing advice to government on how they should rebuild, and we wait until 2021, it's going to be way too late. The train would have left the station and we will be standing on the platform with our hands empty. So this is about both working over the short term, providing advice to government, but also working for the long term in terms of how we're going to be shaping the resource mobilization. I was hearing a little bit earlier this morning, Egypt Minister Yasmin Fouad talking about the capacity building and how the people aspect of this is important, making sure, and then Francis has been talking about that many times and impressing on me that it is about going to developed countries and providing some capacity, but it's also about leaving some capacity there, training people and making sure people are able to pick it up and move the file forward. So definitely those are messages that stick with me. So the addition to the transparency and responsibility part is resource mobilization and capacity building. Francis?
Yes, if I got the question right or the comments right, thank you so much for what you've said, Co-Chair. I'll just want to add a few things, might build more on what you have said as well, that actually this framework, its implementation will be at the national level, of course, up to subnational level. So we will take action at the global level to have the framework in place, but where the action is going to occur will be at country level. So even when you're looking at the matters of capacity building, and I'm glad that my co-chair has reminded me about this, we should be adding the element of capacity development as well. Because you see, capacity building usually is like a program that keeps going on and on. If you're targeting training, say focal points, you've trained them, they know how to do ecosystem assessment and so forth. Focal points only, the 196 plus, they know. But time comes when they leave. So what has happened as they leave? You may find that we don't have capacity yet at the national level. So when you're talking about capacity development here now, you are looking at maybe creating centers of excellence, having some institutional capacities enhanced better than they are, than just focusing on individuals. Calling me to go and attend a meeting, some city, this or that is okay, but one individual alone cannot help us a lot sometimes when it comes to this element of people leaving work or retiring, and you don't know how they are translating that before they leave. And of course, other things, even like on resource mobilization, still that touches down where the action is going to be. These resources, how best are they going to be made available to countries, or how countries are going to do that? So these things, national level action is very important as well. In fact, would be the key to everything.
Perfect. Thank you both for kind of expanding on that answer. Fantastic. So the next question, and I think Jody, you touched on this a little bit, was from Mohammed Manjurul Hassan from Bangladesh. And it was, how can we ensure that Indigenous peoples and local communities will be engaged within the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework? Jody, you had mentioned kind of those open sessions as we work in those working groups. So I'm just wondering, kind of expanding on that a little bit, how can we ensure that continued involvement? How can we ensure that, because when we talk about, as before, in terms of capacity and resources, how can we continue to ensure that Indigenous people and local communities do have those resources and those that capacity to continue their involvement within this global biodiversity framework, and beyond 2020 as we adopt a new strategy?
Is that to me or to the co-chairs or to all three of us?
This one, I believe, it would be all three. I'd love to hear
opinion
from everyone.
Okay, so maybe I could start with the process that is already ongoing within the CBD. As some of you may know, we have a working group on 8J, Article 8J, which is about Indigenous peoples and local communities. We are the only multilateral environmental agreement that actually has space for IPLCs to contribute to the discussions of the COP. We had a meeting of this group, Article 8J working group last year at the margins of SBSTA, before SBSTA 23. The report of this is going to go to our upcoming SBI session, and after that we will hope that there will be decisions made on how IPLCs can continue to be part of the negotiations and political process. However, I think that in the post-2020 framework, and I will let the co-chair speak a little bit more about this, there will be places where IPLCs will be hugely encouraged to actually work with their governments or on their own with their communities to try and implement whatever is negotiated and adopted at COP15. So I will leave it to the co-chairs to take it from there about the post-2020.
So thank you, Jyoti, and I think you set the scene right. If we look at the kind of change in the kind of world we're looking for and what we need to reverse that decline in biodiversity, there is no doubt in our mind that that cannot be done without Indigenous people and local communities. So that's start from there. If they're not there, it's not going to happen. So the question is how and at what level, etc. Many countries are very different approaches. They have structures, etc. And we have to be respectful of that if we want to be successful. So what we're trying to find is the right happy middle where we get the right language in the framework in terms of enabling that action to take place, and then ensure through the follow-up, through what the working group on AJ and whatever successor to that group will be, are enabled to take that tools and that incentive and transform that into actual action on the ground. So in our views, it is absolutely essential that Indigenous people and local community be part of the drafting of the framework. Nothing, that's a saying we use in Canada and about Indigenous people, is nothing is about us without us, and that applies a little bit here, which is about engaging Indigenous people in the discussion about the targets, and then making sure that the language we have is one that works for the various local circumstances enable people to work. So that's all for me. Francis, you want to add anything?
I think very little I'm going to add here that I think even in the post-2020 process itself, we have, as co-chairs, continuously engaged the IPLCs, sometimes even when we are at the open group meetings, the request for meetings to meet us, we've met them severally. We met them, I think, when we had the informal meeting in November last year when we were doing the informal briefing. And I think we specifically had a session for them. So we've always given them audience. We've always, made sure that when they request, we are there to listen to them and, take their views on board. Because when you look at biodiversity and you look at issues of local communities, the linkage is so clear. You are having local communities who constitute perhaps the biggest population worldwide. Talk about the IPLCs in that regard. So you have a bigger constituency that are much more in contact with the biodiversity almost on a daily basis. Almost, maybe in fact, every day they are in contact with the biodiversity. And if you look at the IP-based report, it was so interesting that areas that are under IPLCs are actually we're experiencing less loss, if not even no loss at all, than these other areas. So where you have areas where the IPLCs are those areas were not under threat. So this constituency or the IPLCs are a very important stakeholder for the post-2020. But as George has said, even the convention itself has a provision that already takes into account the importance of IPLCs. So this convention really takes the IPLC issues very seriously, and as co-chairs, we've made sure that we keep that moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So on to the next question, and I believe there was a remember correctly, a question too around kind of technology and sciences. So this question comes from Rodrigo Arias from Paraguay, and the question is, within the context of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, how will advances in biotechnology be regulated and controlled to prevent them from being harmful to human health and the environment? So I believe this is kind of in reference to, as we've seen lately at the international meetings and at the recent talk, that kind of growing question around biotechnology and around kind of those impacts on human health. So I believe, yeah, this is kind of related to that, and how can we ensure human and environmental health as biotechnologies kind of increase in popularity.
So, Francis, maybe you start on this one.
Co-chair, thanks. I think the issue of biotechnology versus conservation of biodiversity has always been generating a lot of debate whenever it comes up. And again, of course, it is coming up in the post-2020 as well. So it has never become anything that doesn't attract a lot of debate or a lot of attention. But looking at the post-2020, how will it be done differently? How will it be regulated? First, I think we are having opportunity to hear feedback from parties on how they want this handled. We have, of course, a number of processes that happens. One, and Jot will correct me on this one if I may be wrong, but I think we have a liaison group that is composed of a number of, the expertise that are there is well balanced. Then we have got the risk assessment as well being debated. I think we have even, there was a request to have nominations for this. So there are various levels of discussion that is happening. And through that process, we get feedback as co-chairs to help us to see that the views coming from those processes are then articulated into the post-2020. So we have got ongoing experts meeting, ad hoc experts working group meeting on the Cartagena protocol. We have got wonders with the compliance committee on the Cartagena Protocol. So there are a number of processes that is happening, and the issues of trying to balance biotechnology with the conservation is of course coming up in those discussions. I know that there is a lot of debate on whether biotechnology can exist with conservation. Most people think perhaps the two seem to be far apart, but I can also say that I think with biotechnology, some of the benefits are there and it is clear. So we need to look at those benefits from biotechnology that would not compromise conservation, but rather help us to do conservation work better. And those are the kind of technologies that I think in the post-2020 will be coming up. We may not really say we can't do away or we can do away with biotechnology, because that might in itself also bring another call it process of moving very, very many steps backwards. There are benefits definitely that comes out of biotechnology, but we need to understand them as we move in the post-2020. But something I need to say before I forget is that we need to build capacity of LDCs, especially, to really do monitoring, to be able to answer questions that come from biotechnology. Because if that capacity is lacking, especially for the least developed countries, then it will mean when questions come, they are not able to answer. When they are needed to take action, they're not able to do it effectively. So capacity building, as we've been talking earlier in the beginning, even on biotechnology, is going to be very, very important in the post-2020. Countries must more or less be at the same level to be able to respond to any queries, to any concerns that would arise out of biotechnology. Because with the biotech, the biggest thing is the fear. What drives people most about biotech is the fear that this is a GMO, this is what, how is it going to affect me, this. So people pose so many questions. So the capacity of these LDCs to respond to that in the post-2020, for all parties, all countries to respond to that is going to be very important, so that we can try our best to allay fears. And also, of course, monitoring the impact of biotechnology will also be important as we go towards the post-2020 process. So we need to be able to do that. If we're going to monitor any interventions from biotechnology to help us to really inform and allay fears, but where monitoring is not being done, and maybe it's compounded by lack of capacity, then the fears will keep building. And so biotechnology will remain a concern like that to most people. Co-chair, you may want to add something.
No, Francis, I think you very, very briefly, you will continue to see targets around those issues in the framework. And actually, what I just want to point you to is in a few weeks, you're going to see some document published for Substack. And those documents are not trying to look at the new language of the target per se, but they're looking at the elements and the monitoring, the potential for monitoring indicators related to all, and in particular with that. So have a look at that. And even when you look at the targets and you don't see specific language that you're looking for, go look at the elements, go look at the performance indicators, because the level of detail sometimes is there, and that may be providing you with what you're looking for. Thank you.
Could I just ask 3 more processes? One is that we have a separate consultation ongoing and a policy and a decision that will be made by the Cartagena Protocol on post-2020. We also have a separate discussion ongoing on DSI, digital sequence information, as well as on synthetic biotechnology. So all of that will, these are discussions that are ongoing, and some of them will come back to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework at its 3rd meeting, and some will go directly to COP. So I think there are many, many processes ongoing to safeguard human health and environment. Thanks.
Perfect. for the answers to that question. Definitely not an easy one, so I appreciate everyone, giving those different options and answers there. I do realize we are getting right at 11:30, very close. I'm hoping that we're still able to get through a few more questions, just as we did have a bunch of questions in the chat and some still left over that were sent in. So I'm hoping maybe we can kind of get through a few, maybe a bit rapidly, just because we do have a privileged opportunity here, and I think a lot of people are very excited to get to speak with the co-chairs and get some questions answered. So what I'm going to kind of jump to next, as I saw, we had a few questions submitted around the pandemic. I think I saw one or two in the Q&A within this chat as well. And I know you briefly touched on it. So kind of wrapping them all together, we've kind of got a question here from Rachel R. Rescordado from the Philippines. So with new pandemics arising, how would the post-2020 global biodiversity framework help to ensure that such diseases will be prevented in the future in terms of global policy, youth involvement, and Indigenous people's roles? In this, how much has the current pandemic changed the post-2020 process in terms of targets? Would there be kind of a larger emphasis on human health and the connection between biodiversity and human health? Yeah, so as we kind of look at the construction of the framework, are there kind of targets or language that are being changed and affected by the current pandemic?
Before we start our response, I know Jyoti has to leave. So if that's okay with you, we should probably let her say a few words, and then after that we'll come back and pick up the question. Is that okay?
Thank you, Jyoti. I know you are sticking on a little, already running a little late, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm sorry we have so many events today, and which is great. And my next event is also a youth event. So we are so pleased and thrilled that the youth are taking this on themselves. As you have heard all along from the co-chairs, from Elizabeth, we are all going to be retired or old and sitting in our gardens by the time 2050 comes along. So we are hoping to pass this baton on to you very soon. I'm the director for implementation, and so for me it's extremely important that you, the youth, are able to take this 30-year framework and make something out of it, and that maybe by 2050 we will really be living in harmony with nature, that we would have reached all those SDGs. We have gone beyond that. We will be in we will have achieved all the 2050 goals, and you will correct the mistakes that we in our generation have made. I really hope that will happen, because as Elizabeth said, youth suffer the most from biodiversity loss, and we hope that this will help in some way mitigate what has happened so far. As we've seen in 2020, we have been at home for 3 months nearly, and nature regenerates. We have seen so many beautiful pictures of nature taking the space that we humans have vacated. I mean, in my country, in India, and there must be some people from India on this chat, I hope, on this webinar, I hope. There are so many fantastic stories coming out, dolphins in places that have never been seen, elephants. You can see the Himalayas from cities where for 30 years people had forgotten that you could actually see them in the past. So I'm so happy that that we've had a chance to see what nature can do. Not happy about the pandemic, but we know that we can, that maybe if we build back better, if we do things differently from this crisis and learn from this crisis, there are really good opportunities. And Gibbon is a family. Gibbon is the family around the world. You guys meet very rarely, but you continue your commitment. So we're so proud to be associated with you at the CBD Secretaries. We're all in this together, and I hope we can get where we want to go. Thank you so much.
Amazing, well said, and thank you, Jody, for giving us some time today and joining us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
So now back to health. So what science is telling us very clearly is the links between human health and pandemics and nature revolve around land use change, contact and contact between human and wildlife. So there is many other variables that influence pandemics, such as outside of biodiversity, such as growth in population, increased travel, but mainly those not easy to tackle with. It's a lot easier to deal with the land use part, the biodiversity one. So we're getting a lot of interest from the health people talking to us and saying, how can we work together? And then the notion of changing land use is relatively complex, and things that are emerging, it is not only about the availability of a space for species to have healthy life, but it's also the stress and what kind of life story they can have. The more stress a species has because of noise, because of contact with human, the easier they're gonna be able to shed some pathogen from their species to another species. So that is, we're looking forward to the IPBES reports. There is a number of countries that are shared with us their own studies, and I think that the science is going to be relatively clear. Now we're getting to the point of the action, and as mentioned earlier, there is probably two phases that are relevant to us. There is the relatively short phase, providing advice to government on what they're going to do in spending those vast amount of money on economic restart. So are they going to go one way, rebuilding roads and bridges and destroying more of biodiversity? Are they going to go the other way, investing in restoration and in creating jobs for people of its place, but also making good for the environment? So we have to provide very quickly those incentives and that package of information to make sure people are aware of the choice they're making. And that's the relatively short-term one. The longer-term one is how do we reflect health in the framework? And that's how we come to the engagement of local communities, indigenous people, and youth. And in a sense, if you look at Draft Zero, you'll see how it's mentioned several times. And what we heard in Rome, which was kind of before the crisis in a sense, these people were happy with that. So we were not asked to remove those things. I think we're going to have some more conversation. There is a big discussion happening on health at SBSTTA, and we're going to have a round of webinar with parties, and we're going to ask them how they see the health question shape. And I think we get enough of a mandate to make sure that we draw the links between the existing piece. So it is not about turning around the framework. It is more about making the links and ensuring people understand the perspective of health. Francis?
Thank you. I think I'll just add something little because you have almost said it all. I think this question really it clearly shows that I think we are all seeing that this pandemic has really raised the bar for the post-2020. And those of you who could have participated in COP11, I think it was in India, in Hyderabad. Now that COP, the theme was nature protects if she's protected. If you check on a book which they have produced, the outcomes of that meeting, that is how it is. Nature protects if she's protected. So meaning, if we are going to be protected from pandemics by nature, first we have to do our part. We cannot continue to degrade, continue to lead to loss of biodiversity and expect nature to protect us. Having said that, as co-chairs and as you will be seeing in the next version of the documents that will be coming out, we you'll be seeing a lot of linkage to health on biodiversity and health is taking a very important role in our drafting. And I think that is something that you, the stakeholders, are going to see. Pandemics, we're still going to come from biodiversity. So that means we can not have a choice now to take biodiversity for granted. And of course, the IPLCs, the youth, the IPLCs, they have a lot of information about how they have maybe treated certain pandemics when it has come, and how still during the post-2020 process, the global community or the world can continue to benefit from that. Because IPLCs, for most of the time, pandemics come, may not be global in nature, some of them within themselves, they are well where they are, but they have always been able to handle that. Now that is knowledge, which it is based on biodiversity, it's based on how they've used that biodiversity they have to answer or to mitigate some of the pandemics that has come. And the youth themselves from the IPLC with the parents who are IPLCs, you expect those are again the future leaders who are going to, or IPLCs are going to pass on the knowledge. So the IPLCs and the youth are so linked and so important when we are talking about looking at pandemics and how biodiversity is going to help us to address that, especially diseases and so forth. So all these groups have got a big role to play. And of course, then government has to put in place the necessary policies that would enable that kind of intervention.
All right, perfect. Thank you both for those answers. Badil, I see that you have to leave now for a call, so I just want to thank you, merci beaucoup, for your time today. You as well, Francis. I'm glad that you were both able to take some time on, I'm sure, your busy schedules, especially on International Day for Biodiversity, to talk with us and answer some questions. So thank you so much. Francis, I don't know if you have time, if I ask you one more question from chat, but I totally understand if your time is limited today.
Hello?
Do you have time for one more question before?
No, it's okay.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. So I was gonna kind of pull together a few questions from chat, as well as some of the questions that we received previously. So we did have a lot of questions around kind of youth involvement in post-2020 and kind of implementation on the ground in their communities. Within your presentation, I think there was a really nice graphic there where you laid out kind of how youth can be involved and the unique role that young people are able to play. So kind of pulling these questions together, I think there's a question around if there's a role that within the framework or from the CBD that can be played to increase kind of youth support, kind of beyond a volunteer way that the CBD can advocate for within the post framework itself, can push for greater youth empowerment and kind of elevation, keeping in mind kind of, for a lot of young people around the world, there are limitations around kind of capacity and resources. So I think to kind of summarize and bring it all together, is there a role that we can see, or is there a part that can be played in the post-2020 process in terms of CBD to help with youth empowerment kind of beyond that volunteer position? Thank you.
Thomas, you're muted.
Sorry, I don't know if Francis, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Or,
his camera is also gone. Francis, are you with us? I think he went offline. Ah, no, he's here, yeah.
I didn't hear much what he was asking. He was still trying to explain, so I don't know what the question was.
Oh, I apologize. So I was kind of wondering if, as we look at the kind of the strategy in that post-2020 framework, if there is a way to, in kind of like writing, or if there's a firm way to help empower youth so that they can be engaged in ways potentially beyond volunteering. Yeah. I think it's kind of like, is there a way within the post-2020 strategy to give youth a platform that's a bit stronger than kind of volunteering?
Thank you. I hope I'll be able to answer that question. First, of course, even in the targets you saw in the zero draft itself, there's one of the targets that was covering the youth itself, and I think we've still made sure that we keep reflecting that. So the youth this time around may not be background there coming. I think going forward, the youth themselves, I think we need to try our best to see that they're engaged, especially at the national level where the actions take place. We need to be making sure that the youth involvement is given a much more prominent role at the national level, because as I said earlier, implementation of the framework will be at the national level. So if we could have youth getting more engaged on biodiversity at national level, then that is one way of making sure that they are, giving a much more active role. I'll tell you that here in Uganda, I can give an example that when you have got an activity going on, say for example, restoration work, and the youth come on board, you realize that you do quite, substantial work in a very short time. Most of them, they have the energy, they are ready to work. So I think designing youth programs within the biodiversity conservation in the post-2020, especially at national level, would be one way to make sure that youth are deliberately taken on board and they become active partners or participants in the implementation of the post-2020 national level. So we have to think of how we engage them more at the national level, because I think at the global level, there is a lot of effort already taking place. But at the national level, that is where programs on youth involvement on biodiversity or implementation of the framework needs to be better grounded. That's how I will try to respond to your question.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that answer and for being able to, join us today and answer all of those questions. I know the call today, the Q&A session has gone a little late, so once again, I sincerely appreciate your time and being able to join us for longer than initial schedule. So thank you so much from the entire Gibbon team today. Thank you. I'm going to pass this along to Simone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Thomas, for running the session. And hi, everyone. You're speaking to Smangile from South Africa, who's part of the South African Youth Biodiversity Network and the steering committee for Gibbon. They've given me a very light job, which is to give a brief summary of the discussion that we had during Q&A. So hopefully, if anyone had not joined in the beginning and you missed some part, I'm happy to share with you a glimpse of what you missed out on. So firstly, I would love us to imagine one thing when we keep on advocating for youth to be involved. We are working towards the 2050 vision of living in harmony with nature. It's currently 2020. In 30 years' time, if you are 20 years right now, you yourself are going to be 50. And I'm saying this to emphasize the role of youth, not only to the older leaders who are here, but to ourselves, that as we grow up, may we always be informed of that we have a duty to keep on engaging those that are coming before us, because we're not going to be youth forever, and whoever is youth is going to be a leader of tomorrow. And the second thing I would love to emphasize on that Francis emphasized in the beginning was, while we have this pandemic, we still do have a post-2020 global biodiversity framework to make, and just to assure us that as the co-chairs, they are still committed to it. Equally, parties are still committed. Now, the first two sets of questions were more or less based on the 2010, 2011 to the 2020 framework, asking of how we are going to ensure that we do better this time around. And in summary, the responses were in the lines of, you are very right, those targets are not fully met. But on the bright side, a lot of progress has been made from that time. Emphasis on the drivers of biodiversity loss have not changed, but we've learned a lot on why we did not achieve those targets. And one of the things they touched on was that at this point now we have IPBS, which is constantly providing factual, up-to-date scientific information that we need for decision making. Another key point that was touched on was on resource mobilization, that at the last time we had the framework and only later on did we build on the strategy for mobilizing resources. Whereas this time around, the discussion for mobilization strategy has already started, and we are doing it concurrently into doing the framework itself. And of course, emphasis on capacity building and other factors that were mentioned. And then we had a set of questions that were linked on how can we increase or improve the participation of RPLCs, of youth, and ensure that technology is taken into account. And just to summarize, firstly, there was a strong emphasis that there are already some processes within the CPD itself to ensure that there's participation of IPLCs and other groups. So those who have had experience, you may have seen that you have Article 8J in the convention. The co-chairs have been very much willing to meet with, in the same way they're meeting youth today for an online webinar. They've been availing themselves to meet IPLCs as well. If you go to actual policy meetings, they've availed themselves to meet IPLCs for side meetings and other NGOs as well. But here there was just an emphasis that of course we still need more to build on, but there are processes within the convention and within this consultative process that everyone's views are being taken into account. And I know on the technical question, they mentioned that there's ongoing expert group on risk assessments and a liaison group. And Francis actually emphasized that while these groups exist, there needs to be more capacity built for the least developed countries in order to be able to engage effectively in these processes. Because it's one thing having the platform to speak, but not having the knowledge, the enough required knowledge or capacity to actually make informed decisions or contributions. And perhaps towards the last set of questions that we're looking forward into, now we had COVID-19, has it changed the scene in any way? So it was clear in the beginning that it has definitely changed the timeline of the meetings, number one. But secondly, that it has had some influence on the priorities for the content of the convention itself. This is the issue that was touched more recently on how there's been a lot of contact from the health sector to say, how do we assist and engage? And of course, we are expecting that there's going to be more research pumped into the convention to say, how do we link, because it's not a matter of changing everything into health, but there's already emphasis from parties and other non-observer participants of the convention sending submissions on how we can link biodiversity to health. And again, on my side, and this is something that I'm building on from the coaches that I would love to really motivate young people on, discussion documents are going to be available online soon. One effective way for us to continue contributing in the process and keeping informed is to download the official documents, assist each other in understanding them, and making written and oral submissions to the parties. And an emphasis that implementation of the convention happens at a national level. So while it's an international level, there's given that exists to chair such sessions, the chairs are willing to come online for implementation. The real power for implementation lies at a national level. So this is a call for every one of you who's watching and who's here today to get in touch with your focal point, for contributing as far as policy involved, for advocating for them to have a more youth-inclusive process, and to engineer your own projects on the ground and see how you can mobilize support. So from my side, that's a short summary. I will give it to you, Priska, to close the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simangele. Yes, I'm Priska Daka from Zimbabwe, and I'm with the Zimbabwe Youth Biodiversity Network. And I'd like to start off by thanking the CBD co-chairs, Francis Brazil and Yoti, for the presentations that they gave, and also for answering all the questions that young people had posted. And we also want to appreciate the message sent to us by the Acting Executive Secretary of the CBD, Elizabeth, which reminded us that we are connected to biodiversity and that nature-based solutions should be at the forefront. Our thanks must also go to the committee, the GYBN committee that put this meeting together and made it a success. And finally, on behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, I would like to express my appreciation to all the participants for taking the time out to join us today, and for everybody who sent in their questions. Thank you so much. And I would like to close my remarks by saying that we as young people are agents, are the primary agents of change, and we must continue giving biodiversity a voice. And with that, thank you so much for your attention, and thank you so much for listening to us, and happy International Biodiversity Day to everyone. Thank you. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, everyone. I think we're gonna close now the session. So
I just wanted to, as well, just kind of say thank you to everyone. Francis, thank you for staying on the call until the end. I don't know if you want to say anything before we ended the call, but yeah. Thank you.
I think I can only say bye. The network is very poor, and we really want to continue working with the youth because a lot that is going to happen in the years to come, it will be the youth actually to do that. So as co-chairs, we are ready to keep working with you, and let's keep the discussion going. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you so much. Happy Biodiversity Day.
Happy Biodiversity Day.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We're really excited and we're very happy for all the great work. And let's continue celebrating the Biodiversity Day today. So take care, and let's continue in our own places. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Stay tuned to our social media.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Biodiversity Day. Yeah.